The Galactic Council had once been unstoppable. For thousands of years, they controlled the galaxy with an iron fist, their fleets unrivaled, their technology far beyond anything the other races could imagine. They believed no one could challenge them. Earth, once home to humanity, had been reduced to nothing more than a forgotten corner of the galaxy. Or so they thought. 500,000 years ago, the Council made a decision that would haunt them for millennia. They had decided that humanity was a threat. The humans had begun to spread through the stars, and their curiosity, their desire to explore, made the Council uneasy. They saw humanity as an unpredictable variable, a species too wild, too dangerous. So they acted quickly, sending fleets to Earth with orders to wipe out every human. The planet was bombarded, cities destroyed, entire populations eradicated. At least that was the plan. For 500,000 years, the Council believed that the human race had been completely wiped out. They had no reason to doubt it. There had been no reports, no signals, no signs of human activity anywhere in the galaxy. Over time, Earth was forgotten, relegated to the dustbin of history. The Council continued its reign, expanding its influence across the stars, crushing any species that dared to oppose them, building a massive empire that stretched across the known universe. But Earth was not as dead as the Council thought. The human race, though nearly destroyed, had left something behind. Hidden deep beneath the surface of the planet, in a forgotten facility buried in the ruins of a once great city, an ancient ship remained. It was unlike anything the Council had ever seen. The ship had been designed for one purpose: to survive. It had been built to protect humanity from threats both external and internal, a fortress in space, a vessel of power, and a weapon of unimaginable strength. But it had never been used. Its systems were dormant, its weapons inactive, its engines cold. For thousands of years, it lay hidden, waiting. The ship had been built by the last of humanity's great minds, a team of engineers and scientists who knew that one day the Council might come for them. They had prepared for this day, though none of them had lived to see it. As the centuries passed, the ship's systems fell into a deep sleep, waiting for the moment when the one thing it was designed to protect, the last of humanity, would awaken. And then, one fateful day, it happened. Deep beneath the surface of Earth, in the heart of the ruined city, the systems of the ship hummed to life. It started with a flicker of light, a soft thrum that vibrated through the long-forgotten tunnels. Slowly, the ship's power began to rise, its engines sputtering to life, its weapons activating for the first time in 500,000 years. The humans who had been frozen in time within the ship's chambers began to awaken, one by one. They had been preserved, kept in stasis, waiting for the right moment. That moment had finally come. As the survivors stepped out into the dim light of the ship's control room, they found themselves in a world they barely recognized. The Earth they had known was gone. The cities they had once lived in were reduced to rubble. The forests had turned to ash. Humanity, once vibrant and full of life, had been wiped from the face of the planet. But they were not alone. The ship's sensors detected movement, ships flying across the sky. The Galactic Council, still thinking that Earth was a dead world, had no idea that a new chapter in the history of humanity was about to unfold. The humans who had survived were not just scientists and engineers. They were warriors, survivors. The ship they had awakened was not a peaceful vessel. It was designed for war. Its weapons were beyond anything the Council had ever seen, capable of destroying entire fleets with a single shot. The humans who stepped onto the ship's deck knew that they had one mission: to make the Council pay for their crimes. The ship's captain, a woman named Ilara, stood at the helm, staring out into the stars. She had been asleep for centuries, but the fire inside her burned as brightly as it had when she first volunteered for this mission. Her eyes were cold, her face set in a permanent scowl. She knew the journey ahead would not be easy. The Council would not go down without a fight, but humanity had something they didn't: rage, vengeance. As the ship slowly lifted off from the ruined Earth, The crew felt the weight of what they were about to do. They were not just fighting for their survival. They were fighting for the future of humanity, for the right to exist. They were going to take back what had been stolen from them, and they would make the Galactic Council regret the day they had decided to wipe them out. The first thing the ship did was send a signal, a message, brief but powerful, that carried across the stars. It was a warning to the Galactic Council. We are coming. The Council, sitting comfortably in their gleaming citadels across the galaxy, had no idea what that message meant. They received it like they had received thousands of other reports, a blip on their radar, nothing to worry about. They had seen no signs of human life in centuries. Earth was nothing but a ghost planet, a faded memory. But this time, they were wrong. The human ship began its journey through the galaxy, making its way toward the heart of the Council's empire. The closer it got, the more the humans aboard it felt the weight of what was at stake. They had been gone for so long, and the galaxy had forgotten them. But they had not forgotten. They were still human, still alive, and they would make sure the Council knew it. As the ship approached the first of the Council's outposts, it was clear that they had made a terrible mistake. They had thought they were safe, but now their safety was a distant memory. The ship moved silently through the stars, its weapons charging, its crew ready to fight. The galaxy had forgotten humanity, but humanity would not forget them. The Galactic Council had no idea what was coming. They had miscalculated, and the price for their mistake would be high. The human survivors, long forgotten and thought extinct, were back. And they were not going to stop until every last member of the Council paid for the atrocities they had committed. The ship entered the galaxy's first defense zone with ease, and the first sign of the Council's presence was a single ship that tried to intercept them. It was no match for the human ship. With a single shot from the ship's main cannon, the enemy vessel was vaporized, leaving nothing but a trail of debris. The Council had been warned, but they were too slow to react. Their arrogance, their belief that they were untouchable, had led them to underestimate the humans. And now, humanity's return was about to change everything. The survivors aboard the ship looked out into the vast emptiness of space, their mission clear. They were not just survivors, they were avengers. The forgotten war had begun once more, and this time, it was humanity's turn to strike back. The Council's reign of terror was over. The galaxy would soon learn that the humans were not as easily destroyed as they had been led to believe. The forgotten war had only just begun. The Galactic Council believed they had erased all traces of humanity. After they annihilated Earth 500,000 years ago, the galaxy moved on. Humanity was a forgotten footnote in the grand history of the stars. But they were wrong. The human race had not only survived, they had evolved, adapted, and bided their time. And now, the Council's arrogance was about to be repaid in full. Deep within the desolate ruins of Earth, an ancient ship had remained dormant, hidden from the rest of the galaxy for centuries. This ship, once the pride of humanity's military fleet, had been built with a singular purpose: to ensure humanity's survival in the event of an extinction-level threat. It had been designed as a weapon, a fortress capable of defending against any enemy. The ship's systems, however, had been inactive for centuries, waiting for the day when its people would need it the most. That day had arrived. When the ship's systems finally came online, it was not by accident. The ship's AI, an ancient intelligence capable of learning and evolving, had detected an anomaly in the galaxy. The faintest trace of a signal, a forgotten human fingerprint in the vast emptiness of space, had been detected. The AI's programming recognized that this was no coincidence. The human survivors had been found, and it was time to awaken the ship. At the same time, on the other side of the galaxy, the Galactic Council was in the midst of celebrating its latest victory, a successful campaign against an upstart species that had dared challenge their rule. The galaxy was theirs to control, and nothing could stand in their way. Or so they thought. They had grown complacent in their power, convinced that no force in the universe could threaten their rule. Their spies reported nothing from Earth. No sign of life, no signals. For 500,000 years, the Council had written humanity off as a non-factor. But now, the humans were returning, and they had no idea. As the human ship powered up, and its engines roared to life, the AI activated a message, a call to the galaxy that would soon strike fear into every corner of the Council's empire. Humanity is not dead. We are coming. The message echoed through space, a warning to anyone who still remembered the name of Earth. The Galactic Council's leaders, sitting in their opulent council chambers, received the transmission without alarm. They were not concerned by a simple message. After all, they had destroyed Earth. There was no reason to believe the human race could ever pose a threat again. Yet beneath their indifference, a quiet unease began to grow. Meanwhile, the ship, the last of humanity's war vessels, began its journey toward the heart of the Galactic Council's empire. It was a massive, silent ship, built to endure and to destroy. Its hull, covered in scars from past battles, gleamed as it cut through the void of space, the engines humming with the raw power of forgotten technology. On board, the human survivors, soldiers, engineers, and pilots, prepared for the battle ahead. They knew what they had to do: destroy the Council, take back their home, and make them pay for the centuries of suffering they had endured. The ship's captain, a woman named Ilara, stood at the helm, her face hard as stone. She had been one of the last to awaken, and the anger burning in her chest was as fierce as the day the Council had destroyed her world. The years of peace that had followed their devastation of Earth had done little to quell her thirst for vengeance. Ilara and her crew had lived through centuries of stasis, their bodies preserved, their minds sharpened, waiting for this moment. The galaxy had forgotten them, and now they were going to remind it. The ship traveled swiftly, its destination clear: the Galactic Council's flagship, the heart of their power. Ilara knew that if they could take down the flagship, they could break the Council's control over the galaxy. But she also knew that the Council would not give up easily. They would fight back with everything they had. And the humans aboard the ship were ready. The first sign that the Council had miscalculated came when the human ship entered the first of the Council's outer defense zones. The patrol ships, standard models with mediocre firepower, attempted to stop the human vessel. They fired their weapons, hoping to intimidate the approaching ship, but they were no match. With one devastating shot, the human ship obliterated the nearest patrol ship, leaving nothing but a cloud of debris in its wake. The Council ships were not even a challenge. They were outclassed, outgunned, and outmatched. The Galactic Council, still unaware of the scale of the threat, continued to brush off the growing whispers of a human resurgence. They thought that the destruction of the patrol ships was a fluke, nothing more than a random event. They had no idea that the last remnants of humanity were coming for them. And this time, they would not be destroyed. As the human ship made its way deeper into Council space, the messages from Earth grew louder. Broadcasts were sent out, warning the galaxy of humanity's return. Some species watched in fear, others in disbelief, but all could feel the weight of what was happening. The Galactic Council, however, dismissed the broadcasts as nothing more than noise. Their arrogance had blinded them to the true threat that was approaching. And then the unthinkable happened. A single human ship, a ship thought to be nothing more than a relic, had already decimated half of the Council's outer fleet. The shockwaves of that attack rippled through the galaxy, reaching the ears of every Council member. Panic spread as the realization dawned on them. Humanity was back, and they were angry. In the heart of the Council's empire, an emergency meeting was called. The Council's top officials, those who had lived through the destruction of Earth, gathered to discuss the growing threat. They looked at the data, they looked at the destruction, and they knew. The humans weren't just coming back. They were coming for revenge, and the Galactic Council would have to fight for their very survival. As the meeting continued, the human ship sailed through the stars, its course clear. There was no turning back now. The forgotten war had begun, And the Galactic Council had made a grave mistake. Their reign was about to end, and humanity was ready to take back what had been stolen from them. The Council's forces began to mobilize, but deep down, they knew it was already too late. The galaxy had been lulled into a false sense of security, and now the humans were here to remind them of just how powerful they truly were. The story of humanity's rise from the ashes was just beginning, and the Galactic Council would soon learn the price of their arrogance. The human ship continued its relentless march across the galaxy, its systems operating at full capacity as it tore through the void of space. The sheer size of the vessel, once a marvel of human engineering, now served as a symbol of the forgotten species' wrath. Every inch of it was designed for one thing: war, and it was ready for that purpose. Ilara stood at the helm, her hand steady as she navigated the ship through the stars. The AI, which had guided the ship for centuries, calculated their path toward the Galactic Council's heart with cold precision. Yet even in the face of such overwhelming odds, Ilara couldn't shake the weight of the years of silence that had followed the destruction of Earth. Those years were filled with darkness and loss. There were few survivors left, but the ones who had endured, who had lived through the pain, carried a burning need for vengeance that would not be quelled. The ship's crew, small in number but resolute in spirit, prepared themselves for what was to come. Their hands moved swiftly over the consoles, adjusting systems, rerouting power, and maintaining the weapons array. Each of them had a singular goal in mind: to make the Council pay for their crimes. These humans, hardened by loss, had become an unstoppable force. They were no longer the weak, scattered species the Council had once thought them to be. They were a reckoning. As the ship approached the outer rim of the Council's vast space, their sensors detected an incoming fleet. Several dozen ships, varying in size and armament, emerged from the darkness, their weapons primed and ready. It was a show of force, a warning that the Galactic Council would not simply let them march through their domain. The message was clear: turn back, or face annihilation. Ilara's lips tightened. She had expected this, of course. But what the Council didn't realize was that humanity no longer feared the odds. It had been their survival against the impossible that had forged them into something greater than they had once been. They had nothing left to lose. Target the lead ship, Ilara ordered calmly. Her voice carried through the ship's communication system. The crew reacted immediately, activating the ship's weapons and targeting systems. The AI, calculating the necessary trajectory, responded. Target locked. Weapons primed. The human ship unleashed its fury in a single devastating blast. A wave of energy erupted from the bow of the vessel, striking the lid ship with pinpoint accuracy. The explosion was immense, the ship disintegrating in a flash of light and fire. The remaining ships hesitated, caught off guard by the sheer power of the attack. They had never seen anything like it. But hesitation was a luxury they could not afford. The remaining Council ships opened fire, their weapons launching a barrage of energy bolts and plasma rounds. The human ship rocked under the impact, but its hull held strong, reinforced by centuries of technology, and designed to endure such punishment. The ship's shields flared to life, absorbing the incoming fire with ease. The human ship had been built not just for defense, but to counter anything the galaxy could throw at it. With a steady hand, Ilara ordered the next move. Engage full firepower. Show them what happens when they attack humanity. The response was immediate. The ship's weapons system powered up, releasing a series of retaliatory strikes that ripped through the Council fleet. Another ship was reduced to rubble in an instant. The rest of the fleet scattered, desperately trying to evade the devastating firepower. But there was no escape. The human ship's targeting systems were too precise, too advanced. One by one, the Council ships were destroyed. In the wake of the carnage, the ship continued its course, leaving the remains of the fleet drifting in space. There would be no turning back. The message had been sent, loud and clear. Humanity was not just returning. They were here to take back what was rightfully theirs. On the Council's flagship, panic began to spread. The once unshakable leaders of the Galactic Council now found themselves faced with a truth they had long buried. Humanity was not gone, and they were not weak. The Council's generals scrambled to form a response, sending out all available ships to intercept the human vessel. But even as they did so, they knew the battle was lost before it had even begun. There were whispers in the corridors of the flagship, rumors that the humans had something far greater than their military might. They had the one thing no one could defeat: resolve. The human ship, with its blackened hull and gleaming weapons, moved forward with unstoppable force, closing in on the heart of the Council's power. As Ilara stood at the helm, she felt the weight of what was coming. The war that would reshape the galaxy was on the horizon, and no matter how many ships the Council sent, no matter how many armies they gathered, they would never stop the humans now. "Prepare for entry into the heart of Council space," Ilara said, her voice steady, yet carrying a promise of retribution. The ship's AI confirmed, course set. "We are ready to breach Council territory." And with that, the final phase of humanity's vengeance began. The Galactic Council, which had thought themselves invincible, would soon learn the full extent of their miscalculation. The humans were no longer the species they had so casually wiped out. They were a force of nature, a storm on the horizon that the galaxy was not ready for. As the human ship made its way through the void, the crew knew that this was only the beginning. What came next would shake the very foundations of the galaxy, and the Council would finally realize the price of their arrogance. The forgotten war had not been forgotten at all. It had only been waiting for its time. And that time had come. The human ship cut through space with relentless precision, its destination clear, the heart of the Galactic Council's power. The weight of the centuries of suffering that humanity had endured seemed to press down on the very fabric of the ship. Each member of the crew knew that the battle ahead wasn't just for survival, it was for the redemption of their entire species. The galaxy had cast them aside, forgotten their name, and erased their history. Now, humanity was returning to remind them all why that had been a grave mistake. Ilara stood in the command center, her eyes fixed on the display that showed their course through the stars. The crew worked efficiently around her, moving with the practiced rhythm of warriors who had lived through countless trials. She could hear the soft hum of the ship's engines, the constant pulse of power that sent them deeper into the heart of enemy territory. The AI, which had guided them since the ship had awoken, spoke in its steady, emotionless voice. "Warning, we are approaching the first line of defense. Several fleets are on intercept course." Ilara's lips curled into a grim smile. She had expected this. The Council would send everything they had to stop them, but they didn't realize just how far humanity had come since their near extinction. She had seen the fear in their faces when their patrol fleets were obliterated, and that fear was now feeding the fire inside her. Humanity's return wasn't just a fight for revenge. It was a statement. It was a declaration that no one, not even the most powerful empire in the galaxy, could erase them. "Activate all systems," Ilara commanded. "Weapons, shields, engines, everything. This is where we end this." The crew followed her orders without hesitation, their movements fluid and confident. The ship's systems hummed to life, its energy shields flaring brightly in preparation for the coming onslaught. They were ready. Ahead of them, the first wave of the Council's fleets materialized. They were massive, a truly impressive force of warships that gleamed in the cold light of the distant stars. They were powerful, but they were still no match for the sheer force of will and technology humanity had brought with them. As the enemy ships closed in, a tense silence filled the command center. Ilara's mind raced, but her face remained calm, focused. "Fire when ready," she said, her voice unwavering. The human ship fired its first shot, a burst of energy that tore through the space between them and the approaching enemy fleets. The energy beam struck the lid ship with pinpoint accuracy, shattering its shields and ripping apart its hull. It was an explosion unlike any the Council had seen, a blast so intense that it lit up the space around them. Debris scattered across the vacuum of space, the remnants of what had once been a proud warship. Before the rest of the fleet could react, the human ship unleashed another barrage. The second ship in line exploded into a fireball, its weapons powerless to retaliate against the devastating strike. The remaining ships scattered in panic, their captains trying to form new strategies, but the human ship was relentless. Every shot was calculated, every maneuver designed to maximize destruction. "Target the next fleet," Ilara ordered, her voice cutting through the chaos. The crew worked quickly, inputting the necessary coordinates and recalibrating the ship's targeting systems. The AI complied, locking onto the next group of ships. As they fired once more, another wave of explosions rippled through the enemy fleet. The Council's ships were no match for the human vessel's devastating weaponry. The human ship cut through the defensive lines with terrifying efficiency, leaving a trail of destruction in its wake. From the Council's flagship, panic began to set in. The fleet had been expecting a skirmish, a battle perhaps, but not this. Not a single ship had been able to stand against the human vessel. News of the human ship's relentless assault spread like wildfire throughout the Council's forces. They were terrified. They had thought that humanity was no more. They had erased Earth from the galaxy's history and moved on, secure in their belief that there would never be a reckoning. But the reckoning had arrived. In the command room of the Council's flagship, the high-ranking officials looked at each other in shock. Their generals, once filled with pride, now stood in stunned silence. One of them, a seasoned commander named Vanter, broke the silence. "This is no ordinary attack," Vanter said, his voice thick with disbelief. "This is a coordinated strike. They've been preparing for centuries. The human race, those creatures we thought we had destroyed, have returned." The leader of the Council, a cold and calculating figure named Tyros, stood at the head of the room, his hands clasped behind his back. He had known that the galaxy could be unpredictable, but he never imagined that humanity would rise from the ashes. He looked at the holographic display of the human ship decimating the fleet and sighed. "Send word to the other sectors," Tyros ordered, his voice cold but laced with urgency. "We need reinforcements now. And bring in the heavy artillery. This ends today." The message was sent out, but deep down, Tyros knew they were fighting a losing battle. They had underestimated humanity for far too long, and now they were paying the price. No amount of reinforcements, no number of weapons, would change the fact that the humans had been right all along. The Council had ignored them, dismissed them as a forgotten species, but humanity had not forgotten. The human ship, now surrounded by the remnants of the enemy fleet, continued its relentless march toward the Council's flagship. Its engines burned brightly, a beacon of fury and retribution. Ilara knew the battle wasn't over. It had only just begun. The flagship would be their final target, the symbol of the Council's power. And it would fall, just like the others. In the quiet of the command center, Ilara's eyes locked onto the final destination. The Council thought they were safe, that they had removed humanity from the galaxy's history. But the truth was far more terrifying. Humanity had never truly gone away. They had waited, they had endured, and now they had returned with a vengeance. "Prepare to breach their defenses," Ilara said, her voice unwavering. "We end this here." The final phase of humanity's revenge had begun. The galaxy had been warned, and now there would be no turning back. The Galactic Council would learn, too late, the cost of their arrogance, and humanity would claim its place among the stars once more. The human ship, now battered but unyielding, pushed forward into the heart of the Galactic Council's defenses. The stars seemed to dim around them as the massive ship carved its path through the vast expanse of space. Each passing moment felt heavier than the last, and yet the crew remained resolute. They had come for justice, for the honor of their fallen, and for the future of their species. The thought of what they had lost, Earth, their families, their history, only fueled their determination to press on. Ilara stood at the helm, her eyes fixed on the battlefield ahead. Her crew, those few who had survived the long journey, were no longer the people they once were. They were soldiers now, warriors with a singular mission: to make the Galactic Council pay for their long-held arrogance. They were no longer outnumbered, no longer on the defensive. They were the storm, and the Council's fleets were nothing but a fleeting gust of wind that would soon be swept away. Approaching the Council flagship, the AI's voice rang out through the command center. "Enemy ships are preparing to intercept." Ilara nodded, though she didn't need to be told. She could feel the tension in the air, the quiet hum of the ship's weapons system as it primed for the final confrontation. The flagship, once a symbol of the Council's might, loomed before them, a massive fortress surrounded by dozens of smaller vessels. The sight would have once been intimidating, but now, to Ilara and her crew, it was nothing but a target. "Prepare all systems. This is it," Ilara said, her voice calm but filled with a quiet fury. "Lock onto the flagship and fire at will." The crew worked in perfect synchronization, each person performing their role with cold efficiency. The ship's weapons systems powered up, its cannons charged with devastating energy. In the distance, the Council's ships swarmed, their weapons charging to unleash a final assault. They thought they could stop humanity, that they could wipe out what had been nothing more than a footnote in their history. But they were wrong. The first shot rang out, a beam of concentrated energy that tore through space and struck the Council's flagship. The explosion was immense, a shockwave that rippled through the surrounding fleet, sending smaller ships scattering in all directions. The flagship, despite its size and strength, was not immune to the power humanity now wielded. Its shields flared under the force of the impact, but they buckled under the relentless assault. The human ship didn't stop. It fired again, and again, each blast hitting its target with surgical precision. One after another, the weapons tore through the flagship's defenses, ripping apart its hull. Explosions erupted from within as the heart of the vessel was shattered, sending debris spiraling into space. The once mighty symbol of the Council's power now looked like a dying beast, struggling to stay afloat in the void. "Direct hit on the flagship's reactor," the AI reported. "Core integrity failing. It's going to collapse soon." Ilara's gaze never wavered. This was the endgame. The Council's arrogance had been their downfall. They had dismissed humanity as insignificant, thinking that they could erase an entire species from history. But now, in the heart of their empire, humanity had returned to show them that they were wrong. The Council had never truly understood the nature of their mistake. They had forgotten that humans had always been at their best when backed into a corner. Now the corner had closed, and the humans were fighting their way out, with fire and fury. The flagship's hull shuddered violently as another barrage from the human ship rocked its foundations. The once proud vessel was falling apart, unable to withstand the power of humanity's revenge. The rest of the Council fleet, seeing the destruction of their flagship, hesitated. Fear rippled through their ranks, and many ships turned to flee, abandoning the flagship to its fate. But Ilara knew this fight wasn't over. The Council's other fleets were still out there, and they would not simply give up. More ships arrived to reinforce the shattered defense lines, a mix of desperation and defiance in their movements.